Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing a full review on the Resident Evil Requiem that was released on February 26th of 2026. At this point, I put in about 22 hours into the game with one playthrough on classic mode. This is the 9th installment in the Resident Evil main series, and I gotta say, I think this has the best story, combat, and gameplay out of all of them. If you haven't played any of them in the series and you're interested in it, I'd recommend it big time, but personally I would play the second and third remake just because there is some characters and areas in this game that you might not understand or know the backstory or what's going on. But either way, even without knowing the previous games, this game will still be a great time. And there was a lot of hype behind this game, and it honestly didn't let me down whatsoever. I'm going to give you guys a rundown on the story, what it's about, then I'll be going over the whole game in general and my thoughts on it. The story of this game is set 30 years after Raccoon City was destroyed in Resident Evil 3, and it was basically left a complete wasteland. There's two main characters that you play as in this game, and Grace Ashcroft is the first one I'll explain. She is an FBI intelligence analyst, and we are first introduced to her in this game, and she is sent to investigate a series of deaths at the condemned Renwood Hotel, where her mother died 8 years prior, and in the midst of her investigation, she is kidnapped, finding herself trapped in the Rhodes Hill Chronic Care Center, fighting off the infected. Leon Kennedy is the other main character you play as in this game, and he's also the main character in many of the other Resident Evil games as well, but was first introduced in the second one, I believe. In the game, Leon is sent to Renwood City, and he is deployed as a DSO agent to investigate a lead regarding a person of interest, Dr. Victor Gideon, who is a former Umbrella researcher and is the main antagonist of the game and is suspected of kidnapping Grace Ashcroft. If you're not aware of what Umbrella is in Resident Evil, it is a corporation that is primarily the antagonist in the Resident Evil franchise, and it's basically a massive corrupt pharmaceutical conglomerate that produces medicine and consumer goods, while it secretly develops bioorganic weapons, most notably the T-virus, which caused the first infected outbreak of zombies in Raccoon City. In the beginning, as Gideon kidnaps Grace, he releases a mutated T-virus strain at the Renwood Hotel by shooting darts into the civilians and creating an outbreak in the city, and this strain he releases creates a more advanced, intelligent zombie. He ends up causing this outbreak as a distraction to cover his escape with Grace, and also I'm going to avoid giving any spoilers on why exactly he kidnaps her, so you will end up having to figure it out for yourself by playing the game. I'm going to be going into the specifics of the gameplay now. If you've already played any of the other Resident Evils, then you'll be fairly familiar with how this one is played. There is some new minor mechanics that I'll be going over as well. The game switches between Grace and Leon's point of view, and you have the choice to play the characters in first person or third person. But as for default, Leon's character is supposed to be played in third person and Grace is in first person. The game is divided up into three main segments and playing as both of the characters. And at its core, this game is a combat survival horror game, just like the majority of the others in the series. And you spend a lot of your time navigating interconnected environments, searching for items like keys, items for puzzles, trinkets, and avoiding or confronting infected zombies in the areas. Playing as the main character, Grace, for the most part, it's more stealthy gameplay, and honestly it's just by preference. You can play it however you want to, obviously. At the start you are pretty vulnerable with limited resources that you have, and you do start with a pistol with hardly any ammunition, and eventually you are able to craft ammo to help you survive. In most situations playing as her, it's basically pure survival horror, and you want to be as stealthy as you can to avoid dying for the most part. Like a lot of Resident Evil games, though, there is puzzles and safes, and you encounter majority of them playing as Grace. In this game, as well as the others, you do come across certain items needed for survival, such as green herbs, which heal you, ammo, and trinkets, and tools, and keys needed to progress an area or for a certain puzzle. And you also get weapons, knives, grenades, throwables, upgrades, attachments for your weapons, and hip pouches for extra slots in your inventory. They did introduce a new mechanic to craft different items while playing as Grace, which I thought was pretty cool. You end up using a tool called the blood collector to craft different items that you need. And after you find the blood collector, you'll be able to collect the infected blood that you find throughout the areas. And when you pair the blood with crafting items you find, such as scrap, rare metals, and green herbs, you can then craft extra bullets for any weapon. You can craft injectors to recover your health and to permanently upgrade your health bar. You can also craft Molotov cocktails and other items too. If you're playing on classic difficulty, you'll be able to craft items called ink ribbons, which you can only save with Grace using those aside from autosave points, which makes classic mode that much more difficult. And I'll go over the difficulties here soon. You can expand your crafting abilities as well. You end up finding items called blood specimens that you can use at these laser microscopes that you find around the care center, which then lets you craft more items. It sounds like a lot, but it's very easy to figure all this out without having to look up a guide. Playing as Grace, though, there is a lot of moments of tension and trying to escape certain areas, and she is a character that deals with a lot of past trauma. And you'll notice throughout the game that she is a bit of a pushover. Honestly, the more scarier moments that happen in the game happen while playing as her, in my opinion, and it makes it feel a lot like old school Resident Evil while playing as her. And most of the situations you feel constantly on edge, and it makes the game feel a lot more intense, which I personally enjoy. Moving over to Leon, while playing with him, he has a lot more moments of action compared to Grace, and is definitely a lot more combat heavy. At the beginning, you start with the alligator snapper, which is a pistol, and you also have a hatchet that you can use for melee attacks, and the hatchet really helps for finishing off enemies and avoiding using ammo. They also introduced a new parry mechanic that you can use with Leon and his hatchet. You can parry any incoming attack, which is really nice, and that goes for any boss or enemy. Throughout the game, you get a bunch of weapons you can use as well. The game splits time between Grace and Leon's perspective, as I mentioned before, and it does feel nice to go back and forth. It almost feels like going back to Leon gives you a break from nonstop stress and intense moments that Grace's point of view gives you. Once you progress a bit with Leon, you come across these supply boxes, and it'll explain how they work once you get to this point. But basically, the more enemies you kill, the more credits you get, and you can use these credits to buy ammo, armor, health, weapons, and upgrades for your weapons. It's honestly pretty cool because it builds a little incentive to kill every enemy you come across so you can max out your weapons and buy whatever you're short on. Overall, though, playing with Leon feels like straight-up action-packed, fast-paced, kicking-ass moments where Grace is a little bit more sneaking around, wondering what is going to pop out and scare you. In my opinion, I like having both points of view from Grace and Leon. The mix of intense, anxious horror and fast-paced action keeps things interesting, and it keeps the game from feeling super monotonous. As for enemies that you come across, if you played any of the Resident Evil games, then you experience most of what you'll see aside from bosses. You do come across a lot of zombies, which were once nurses, cleaners, officers, patients, and staff. The infected in this game are a little different than previous games, which I thought was very cool that they did this. There's a new mechanic called memory looping, which makes each infected's mannerisms different from the other. And this only goes for certain zombies. Not all of them do this. Instead of wandering around aimlessly like they usually do, these infected are trapped in tragic, repetitive loops of their previous human lives. For example, some of them are performing mundane tasks like cleaning a mirror, cooking an empty stove, and sometimes they appear visibly sad or confused, and they'll even be talking every so often. And you'll be able to understand them better with the subtitles on as well. If you shine a flashlight at some of them, they'll yell at you to turn the light off before they aggressively come at you. All of them do become aggressive once they hear you or see you, and that should go without saying. But at a certain point in the game, the infected will start mutating after you have already killed them, and only some of them do this. But it is caused by a new strain of the T-virus their head will boil up and get swollen, and they become a lot more fast and aggressive. They also take more bullets to kill once they form into this version as well. Some of the infected can carry around items as well and throw them at you. It does vary from zombie to zombie what they will be carrying, but I would keep this in mind, and if you're playing as Leon, utilize the parry mechanic as much as possible. As for bosses, there's a total of 8 bosses that you'll encounter throughout the whole game. Majority of them that you come across are when you are playing as Leon. Some of them have a boss health bar and some don't. I'm not going to spoil any of the details about them or when you encounter them, but I will say that they are very well done, and none of them are extremely hard to the point of repetitive attempts or anything. Going over the difficulty in the game, there's 4 different difficulties, and when you're first starting the game, there's only 3. The first one I'm going to go over is casual, which is designed for a more relaxed experience for people who just want to enjoy the story and not have to deal with a whole lot of challenge or difficulty. Enemies do a lot less damage and they have less health. There's a lot more resources that you come across too, such as health and ammo. And if you've never played these games and you're new to the shooter action games in general, I'd recommend casual. The next difficulty is standard modern. This is basically just a little step up from casual, and this is the most balanced difficulty in the game, honestly. It's enough to make you think twice about spending your resources and strategize on how to kill certain enemies. There's a fair amount of resources to get, and enemies have a decent amount of health and deal a little bit more damage than the previous difficulty. The next difficulty I'm going to go over is Classic Mode. This one is for, quote, long-term fans of the Resident Evil series and those who have had a good amount of experience with playing these games. It is technically the hard difficulty of the game, and it has less autosaves, and it requires you to use those ink ribbons to save while playing as Grace, which are items you can find or craft, and they are not the easiest to come across. I ended up playing on this difficulty and had a great time with it, honestly. There were a couple moments that had me a bit frustrated because of having to start back a little ways after I died and not being able to save. But overall, it was a good experience and not extremely hard. If you choose one of the last 2 difficulties I mentioned and you end up dying a lot, it will ask you if you want to lower the difficulty, which you obviously don't have to if you don't want to, but if you're struggling a lot, it is a good thing to have there for you. Once you beat the game on any difficulty, you unlock the Insanity difficulty, which is pretty self-explanatory. Leon and Grace take more damage, and enemies usually kill you in one hit, and the enemies are harder to stagger. The blisterhead enemies that I showed you a little bit ago appear much earlier in the game. Some enemy spawns are randomized compared to standard playthroughs. And the standard save combinations are completely different, requiring you to find them again rather than relying on the previous locations. Key items like antique coins and inventory upgrades like hip pouches are moved to more dangerous and different locations. Checkpoint autosaves are infrequent. Manual saves for Grace still require ink ribbons. Certain bosses like the girl boss at the beginning of the game move at ridiculous speeds, and interaction speeds like pushing carts or whatever is significantly slowed to increase tension and risk. So if you want a challenge on New Game Plus, I'd give it a try. The overall difficulty in the game is pretty standard from other games. There was no point that made me wondering why the game is so hard. It feels pretty fair rather than punishing. The enemy encounters are honestly more about decision making rather than reflexes, and for the boss fights you mainly just want to observe patterns, find their weaknesses, and get a good strategy going. Moving on over to the graphics of the game. The game is super highly detailed in my opinion. I think it looks great. The environments are very well designed, and the game has a really nice balance between resolution and performance. I'm running the game on a 4060 RTX with an AMD Ryzen 5 5600 6-core processor. The game ran absolutely flawless for the most part. There was maybe 2 moments in the whole game where a cutscene got a little bit stuttery. Other than that, it ran great. I had it running on 120 FPS with frame generation, and it looked amazing. I didn't experience any input latency or lag issues at all. I also had DLSS set to performance as well, and there is also path tracing in the settings as well, which is a more advanced form of ray tracing that stimulates the full physical behavior of light, giving photorealistic lighting, reflections, and global illumination. It makes the game look really, really good. It's mainly meant for higher end PCs though, and DLSS ray reconstruction is enabled when this is on, and it helps maintain the high frame rates. Overall, the detail in the cutscenes looked really, really good, as well as the gameplay. In the beginning of the game, the opening areas of the rain-soaked city was just mind-blowing with the environment detail and ray tracing effects. I'd really like to try it on my PS5 and experience it on there and see how well it looks. But honestly, however you're playing it, it's going to look great. Going over to the sound and music. The audio and the music in this game were great. I thought it was really cool that they implemented reprise versions of classic tracks that are in recognizable areas in the game. I mainly noticed this when you arrive at the police station in Raccoon City. It definitely blends nostalgia with a darker tone, and the theme song to the game is actually performed by the same singer who did the theme song to the Resident Evil 4 remake. I just found that out. There is a new audio feature as well that, from what I've heard, sounds pretty cool. I myself don't have a sound system that I use for gaming. I mainly just use headphones, but if you're one of those people who uses a surround sound system, I'd recommend using the new reverberation sound tech. It's a setting in there, and it's a new audio design specifically for distance perception. It's supposed to mimic how sounds bounce off surfaces in real environments, making it easier to track enemies down a hallway. It basically simulates the natural persistence of sound and creates a realism to audio by creating a tail of sound that makes the space feel small, large, or echoing. I've honestly read nothing but good things about it, and I have heard people saying that they experience severe dialogue desync, cutouts, and echoing in cutscenes. I can't say if I experienced that at all, really, but this is what I read online. So if you are experiencing those issues, ensure that the game is on a solid state drive and not a hard disk drive, and adjust the audio sample rates to 4800 hertz. I read that actually helps. Also, you can try capping the frame rate in the display settings to see if it stabilizes the audio if you are dealing with that issue. But overall, though, I thought the sound was amazing. Also, the deluxe edition includes the Raccoon City Classic audio pack, which allows you to change the modern background music to the original 1998 Resident Evil 2 score in certain areas. You can also change the modern UI sounds to the classic menu sound effects, which I thought was pretty cool to mess around with. I didn't honestly realize I could do this until after I beat the game. Unlike the previous remakes, though, you can toggle the music and menu sound effects independently of each other. But yeah, wrapping up this review and giving you guys my personal perspective on it, I can honestly say this was the best Resident Evil game that I have ever played in the series. And I honestly mean that. From start to finish, the game constantly reminded me why I love the series so much. And it really manages to balance everything that makes Resident Evil great, like the horror, the action, the storytelling, without ever feeling like it leans too far in one direction. One of the biggest things that stood out to me was just how incredible the game looks. The graphics were just so insanely good, and the environments in certain areas felt so detailed. Whether you're creeping like through dark areas or exploring large open areas, the lighting, the textures, and the character animations all work together to create like a really immersive experience. And there were so many moments in the game, mainly the opening scene on the street, and there were many others where I just stopped and looked around to appreciate how well the game looked. And I normally don't do that. It's very few games where that happens. The story is super captivating, it's deep, engaging, and it keeps you invested the whole time, and it does a great job of expanding the narrative without feeling super confusing or overcomplicated. Like the majority of the Resident Evil games, every major moment feels honestly really meaningful, and by the time the credits roll, it feels like you've gone through a full journey with Leon and Grace. I also really love the way the game handles its dual perspectives, like playing as Grace brought some genuinely terrifying moments, and her sections leans heavily into the survival horror side of the series, where every sound or dark areas makes you super nervous, and every corner could have something pop out at you. And not gonna lie, these moments had me on edge the entire time. Then switching over to Leon completely flips the pacing in the best way. Leon's sections feel much more action-packed, giving you those intense combat encounters and adrenaline-filled sequences that mainly the modern games and remakes are known for. The contrast between the two playstyles works really, really well, and it keeps the game feeling fresh all the way through. Honestly, after finishing the entire game, I can say I didn't run into any major issues that took away from my experience with it. Everything felt polished, well-designed, and really well put together. It's rare to play a game where the pacing and the gameplay and the story and presentation all come together so smoothly. For me, Resident Evil Requiem is the best game in the series. And if you're a longtime fan, there's a lot here to love, honestly. And if you're newer to the series, it's a good entry point. If you haven't played any of the previous games, you might not understand some of the characters or areas you come across, like I said before. But I'd recommend playing number 2 and 3 remakes before playing this game. Honestly, it's not necessary, though, and I think you'll enjoy it regardless. Overall, this was a great game, and one I'll definitely be coming back to again, and possibly try the insanity difficulty just to see how hard it is. But yeah, that's going to wrap things up for the review of Resident Evil Requiem. If you guys enjoyed the video, please make sure to leave a like and subscribe over to my channel. Let me know your thoughts on the game and if you guys enjoyed it or not. But yeah, thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you guys next time.